Hey guys, it's Jenna. Welcome back to my channel today. In today's video, I'm actually going to go over the best Natasha Denona minis that I think are worth purchasing. Natasha Denona is a beautiful luxury eyeshadow brand and she makes some gorgeous formulas, but she also makes some pretty expensive palettes. So recently she came out with a mini version of a lot of her best-selling palettes, and some of the minis were terrible. I'm going to be ranking them from the worst mini that I've ever tried all the way to the best mini that I think you can absolutely buy with confidence because it performs super well. So without further ado, let's rank all of the Natasha Denona minis I have ever tried from worst all the way to the best. When I think about the Natasha Denona minis and the worst one that I've ever tried, it's sad, but it has to be the Mini Lila palette. This is definitely the worst palette I have ever tried from her for the mini version of things, and I believe this palette is discontinued or getting discontinued because I really haven't seen it in stock anywhere. Kind of for the best, actually. Not gonna lie, I'm not mad at that situation. This is the original Lila palette and it is absolutely stunning. So first of all, I feel like the Mini Lila, I don't know, I'm not sure if it represented this palette really. Like, I think it could have done a little bit better with representation of what this palette is. Granted, she'll sometimes do complementary minis, so not exactly the color story in the original, but just something that could work together with those shades in case you have both. But I actually feel like this was a bit of a missed opportunity for her because this is such a best performing palette and the mini is just not worth it whatsoever. The mini is quite dry, it's quite patchy, a lot of them are hard to blend, they're very stiff. So this is something that even at the lower price point, I would never recommend. So if you happen to find it, skip it. Definitely get one of the better minis that I talk about in this video, but Mini Lila is the absolute worst. It is palette number 8. Now the 7th place palette is also not that much better than Mini Lila, unfortunately. It's still better, but not quite to the quality that Natasha Denona is known for. Number 7 is Mini Sunset, and this one, unfortunately, although some shades were actually fine, they performed beautifully, they were very creamy, they were blendable, some of them really weren't. So we were sort of having a situation where it was the majority are kind of stiffer, kind of hard to work with, and there's a few of them that were just fine. So I do think a lot of people can make this palette work. I think you just need some patience. I do like the color story of this one. I think that it actually represented the original Sunset palette a lot better than the Lila one did. So for that, I give her credit because it's a little bit of a better color story, but quality-wise, still not quite there. So this is one, I still believe you can get this one, but this is one that I absolutely think you can still skip. If you're wanting these colors, you could go for a midi palette from Natasha instead, like the Sunrise palette, or you could save up for the big Sunset palette, which is superb quality. The mini one, definitely avoid. This is palette number 7 and not the best from Natasha Denona's mini collection. Next palette, which is palette number 6. Now this is actually one of the recent minis that Natasha Denona has done. This is Mini Xenon, and the reason why I put this here is for 2 reasons. The black in here is actually pretty poor performing of a black when swatched, and also when you put it all over the eye. If you're wanting something super dramatic, like a black matte black lid type thing, I personally don't do looks like this on the regular, but if you do want to do kind of like a little bit of shadowing on the outer lid, you can do that. But as soon as you use quite a bit or make it the main focus of your eye, that's when the discrepancies of this shade actually expose themselves, because now you have a lot of a canvas to work with and it's very, very patchy. So this is the matte on the very end I'm talking about. You can see here in the swatch, this is actually a really good swatch of this palette. I'm actually multiple layers to get this to look a certain way, but it is quite crumbly. You can see that. The rest of the shades though are fantastic. That's the thing. And the color story is quite icy and a little bit retro. it's not like colors I would typically wear on a regular basis, which is why I've kept it kind of lower to the bottom. I really, really like the shimmer in the center of the palette here. It's probably the best, strongest shade in this palette. It's very creamy, very pigmented, basically a beautiful disco ball type color. So super gorgeous. Otherwise, this palette is just okay when it comes to color story. So would I recommend a palette like this for everyday use? Certainly not. It's fun to have colors like this in your collection, but just keep in mind of that black. This is palette number 6. Now we are at the last 5 in this countdown, and you guys, before I start with number 5, I have to let you guys know that we're now splitting hairs when it comes to quality issues because all of these are fantastic. So palette number 5 is Mini Gold, and this one is so gorgeous, you guys. It's actually like my little glam palette that I have, not to be confused with her Midi Glam palette. This is certainly not supposed to be the complementary palette to that. This is supposed to be the complementary palette to her gold palette, which is gorgeous. It's so beautiful. So this is the gorgeous Mini Gold palette. You can see here that it has really beautiful tones, and this is one like the greens and that beautiful duochrome here. Not typically colors I wear, but when I do wear them for like a night out, I'm always so impressed with their performance, how creamy they are, how blendable, and how all of those shades are compatible together. And I only ranked it in 5 because it's not something I wear every day. You can see here that these are just gorgeous colors. I love the shimmers in here. The mattes perform so well. And I like to smoke out with that plum shade. So this is super pretty and definitely worthy of the top 5 for sure. This is Mini Gold. Let's talk about the palette in number 4th position. This is Mini Nude. This, you guys, is so nice. It's perfect for everyday wear. I will say when it comes to splitting hairs here, because we are talking about quality here, very minor deficiency in this palette, like just tiny. You can barely tell. It's this shade at the very end, the deepest matte, a little bit, a teeny bit stiff. We're not talking about anything super insane where it's not like working for you or anything, but I just noticed a little bit of a difference there compared to the other mattes in this palette. So just so you guys know, a deal breaker, certainly not, but something to know when you are purchasing or thinking of purchasing a palette like this. This is supposed to be, I believe, the complementary palette to Natasha Denona's Biba palette, and Biba is a fantastic palette as well. So if you can't afford to get Biba, or you just kind of want some tones in there, but not necessarily the whole palette, the whole shebang, this is a beautiful substitute to get some gorgeous, everyday friendly makeup looks. So 2 mattes in here, 3 shimmers. You can see that you can easily bring this palette from day to night because you can do some really nice, softer matte colors, and then you can just go in with some shimmer for transitioning into the evening. So cute. I wear this one a ton, actually. This is palette number 4. Palette number 3 is actually on my eyes today, and it's one of my favorites, which is why it's made the top 3. These are some very high-performing mini palettes from Natasha Denona, and this one is Mini Zendo. This is palette number 3. This is gorgeous, you guys. It's very interesting because she has made a Zendo midi palette now. There are some tones in there that do complement, but there's some that are also very different. So I actually would prefer the mini over the midi palette. So if you do have any kind of tossing and turning thoughts about, do I get the midi Zendo? Do I get the mini Zendo? Get the mini Zendo. I tell you, it is so worth it, and it's actually way more affordable too. These shadows in here are so complementary to each other. You can get a gorgeous look. What I did was I just went all over the lid with this matte, and I did some sparkle with this one. This is in the center here. This is smoked out on the end. So it's honestly so easy to use, and all of these shades are perfection. I was actually super excited to see that she has developed the Zendo line into a midi as well, but that palette, you guys, it's good, honestly, overall, but there are some discrepancies in shade, so I will say it's an overall softer palette. This one is just like pigment forward, super Natasha Denona-esque, like just very characteristic of her style. This is palette number 3. I would recommend it over the midi palette for sure. Let's talk about the mini palette in number 2 position. So we're almost at the top, the best mini palette ever from Natasha. But these, like I said, we're splitting hairs here. These are some beautiful palettes, and now I'm just ranking them based on how often I use them, which is so hard to do because these are in constant rotation in my collection. Number 2 is Mini Love. This is so pretty. It's so, so gorgeous for Valentine's Day, for date night, I don't know, an anniversary or something. I just think these tones are so lovey-dovey, romantic, super, super pretty. And I do think that this is a really nice snapshot of the Midi Love palette that she has. Granted, I don't actually know if I'd recommend the Midi Love over this. I believe that when I tested the Midi Love palette, I got a dud because a lot of people really have some great success with that one, but for me, I had a lot of stiff, patchy shades in mine. So I would suggest that maybe you should just get the mini because then it's almost a sure thing. You're not going to get a dud palette. 2 mattes in here and 3 shimmers. Very interesting textured shimmer over here. It's actually a little bit more of like that flakiness in nature, so it will tend to fall a little bit, but it's still super pretty that I do think that it is worth checking out this palette. All of these shades in here are super complementary, and I just love how we have the purple and the pink with that gorgeous creamy off-white. So this is just a stunner, especially for like Valentine's Day for sure. I don't know, I just love it so much. This is palette number 2, and the quality of this is so fantastic. Let's talk about the palette in number 1, my favorite mini palette from Natasha Denona. This is the Natasha Denona Retro palette, the mini retro palette. I should clarify because we do have a midi retro palette coming very, very soon. By the time you see this video, I believe I'll have already reviewed the midi palette. So we'll see if it actually is worth the hype or not, but it's interesting how the color story is so different compared to the mini. I really love the mini. I think this is a beautiful springtime palette. 100%. I think this is perfect for Easter, for spring vibes. Love the gorgeous colors in here. We have the pinks, we have the blues. This is definitely the mini palette that I use the most, and I'm so excited to let you guys know that I think this is the best one that you should get out of everything, especially if you have preferences like me. All of these shades are so, so pretty. I just love how this is so versatile. You can get so many looks from this, even with just 5 shades. So I really, really love that. This is one that I think is more appropriate for every day, especially in the spring and early summer. This is Mini Retro from Natasha Denona. It is palette number 1. What do you guys think is your favorite Natasha Denona mini palette? I really hope that this video of ranking the worst all the way to the best is helpful for you when it comes to deciding which mini palette is right for you. Until my next one, guys, take care and stay safe. Bye, guys!